Welcome everyone, I'm Jafar Hassan and this is Africa Matters. This week we get a status report from some of the countries who have been trading under the historic Africa Free Trade Area. And we find out whether or not it is living up to its promise of boosting trade across the continent nearly 3 years after its launch. The African Continental Free Trade Area opened for business in 2021. It has the ambitious goal of boosting trade between the 1.3 billion people on the African continent and expanding the more than $3 trillion economic bloc. To achieve this, countries are working to remove trade barriers to allow the free flow of goods, services, investments, and promote integration across borders. Let's take a look at the state of play. UN trade statistics show that African countries trade more with the rest of the world than with each other. Intra-regional trade in Africa accounts for about 16%, compared with 59% in Asia and 69% in Europe. But critics argue that these numbers do not factor in regional and informal cross-border trade. There are at least 8 regional economic blocs in the continent that architects of the trade deal say can be used as building blocks to help expand into a bigger continental trade area. African nations do not have a single currency like the euro, making it difficult to trade using more than 40 currencies that the World Bank says could attract an estimated $5 billion a year in extra costs on traders. And for ordinary Africans, visa-free access in most parts of the continent remains a pipe dream, with some governments citing fears that it would put pressure on their labor markets and cities. Let's hear more from Douala Sembène. He's a non-resident fellow of the Center for Global Development. He joins me now from Dakar, Senegal. Douala, thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Matters. It is still early days, but is the African Continental Free Trade Area living up to the promise of promoting intra-African trade?
Well, thanks for having me. I would respond that indeed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is actually living up to expectations. As you know, it has 2 phases. The first phase was to actually approve trade in goods and services and the dispute settlement system. That has been actually already done, and trade under the AfCFTA has begun since January 2001. The second phase was actually to approve the protocols on investment, intellectual property rights, digital trade, and that has been done earlier this year. So yes, it is on track, and a number of achievements have already been made. On top of having actually, of course, trade resume in goods and services, there has been a number of mechanisms that have been approved, including a mechanism that actually gathers all regulators and traders and customs, which is called the AfCFTA hub, and other actually mechanism that also was approved. Yes, so I think it's moving along very well, and it has been signed by, the agreement has been signed by 54 African countries, and 47 of them has been ratifying that agreement, so which bodes well for the future of the agreement.
Critics say that the current African trade figures do not represent the informal trade that takes place in the continent. Do you think that is a fair assessment? And how can the Continental Trade Deal help such traders?
Well, I think, as you know, the objective of the Continental Trade Deal is actually to implement a single African market, and I think this is something that is of course facing a number of challenges, although there has been some progress that are being made. And like in many continent and regions and countries, African countries, of course, are facing issues in dealing with the informal sector. But I think the beauty of the trade agreement would be actually to allow to really make a step forward in this area by making sure that more SMEs, more small and medium enterprises are able to add and create value and to be trading competitively across the continent. And I believe that's something that certainly would be very much a step forward. And I believe the idea that there is some strong commitment at the highest political level from all African countries that have signed into this agreement is also something that is very much encouraging. And I think those technical issues that you talked about and that some critics are pointing out are there, of course, but I think they're easily resolvable. And I believe that there are steps that are being made in that direction.
Douala, poor transport infrastructure, different custom systems and currencies are some of the key challenges cited by business people. What can be done to tackle this problem?
Yes, and I think this is a fair criticism that has been made, that if you want to move goods from, let's say, one region in Africa to another region, you're facing a number of barriers, whether we are talking about trade barriers or whether we are talking about non-trade barriers. And those are the type of barriers that the AfCFTA is trying to overcome. And I think what can be done, of course, is to make sure that you harmonize the trade policies across the countries, and that's one of the key objectives of the trade deal. What you can do also is to make sure that you find a way to put together all regulators and all custom authorities and, of course, traders. And I think this is also what is being done across the AfCFTA hub that was put in place in coordination and in collaboration with the Afreximbank. So I think those are the type of sort of a step that needs to be made, and I think there are some encouraging steps that are being made. Of course, there is still a long way to go, but I think it was very much encouraging that recently also the AfCFTA Secretariat was able to put in place a reporting mechanism whereby when traders and other actors actually notice that there are some non-trade barriers, they could report them so that the relevant authorities are able to address those issues. And I think that's the type of incremental step that would lead to a situation where it would be much easier to move trade from one region in Africa to another region. And I think this is the aim of the trade deal.
Fascinating insights into the topic. Now, before I let you go, Douala, let me ask you, how can smaller African nations safeguard their economies and labor markets from being flooded by bigger economies or bigger countries, perhaps?
And I think this is actually a key concern that the African government had when they were setting up the AfCFTA. And I think the idea was to make sure that, yes, and to recognize that in the short term, there would be certainly some distortion that would arise from the implementation of the CFTA. And how to go about it was, I think it was agreed that there would be a differentiation of countries according to their income level. So those countries that are deemed to be least developed countries would be actually allocated more time to remove trade barriers compared to other countries. And I understand that those least developed countries were given 5 years to remove trade barriers, whereas the others that are more developed actually were given, were given 10 years to remove their barriers, whereas others actually had to achieve that outcome within 5 years. So this is a way, for instance, to make sure that you take into account the fact that some least developed countries may not necessarily be ready to very much remove all barriers in one term. But I think over time, the beauty or the sort of the key objective of the CFTA would be to make sure that all countries are able to really remove all barriers, whether we're talking about trade and non-trade barriers, and in a way that would, of course, allow them to participate in the trade deals across all the continent, but of course without necessarily being the big losers. And I think this is something that takes time, that requires capacity building, that requires policy advice, and I think those are mechanisms that have been already set in place in Africa, and I think we are hoping that this will help achieve those key objectives of the trade deal of the CFTA, which is to really boost income in Africa by over 450 billion by 2035, and to be able also to lift more than 30 million people out of poverty.
Douala Sembène, thank you very much for joining us on Africa Matters. There's still to come here on Africa Matters.
Africa has one of the largest and fastest growing populations in the world, but it is difficult for countries on the continent to trade amongst themselves. I am Darren Alan Cheyune, visiting an export business in Kampala, which hopes to grow further through the African Continental Free Trade Area Initiative.
I am Isaac Kaleji in Accra, and I'll have more about the support being given to local businesses in Ghana so that they can get the most from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Most African countries export their goods and services to countries like the US, China, and the European nations. But the continent is searching for progress by aligning its own structures to free up a regional market of more than 1 billion people through the African Continental Free Trade Area. We begin in the East African city of Kampala, from where Darren Allen reports.
It is a busy time of the year for this 23-year-old beverage company. About half of the products from this warehouse are exported to neighboring countries. While the business is growing, it is not entirely a smooth journey.
In terms of exporting our final products to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the main issue we face is the poor infrastructure in terms of roads connecting the two countries together. And what this causes is it takes a huge amount of time to get our product from our manufacturing facility in Kampala to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it also causes other issues such as vehicle breakdowns, and we lose a lot of time in that process.
Exporters say it takes about 2 days on the road and costs them about $2,500 to move a 40-foot truck of goods from Kampala to the DRC. Since last year, the Ugandan government has been building a 223-kilometer road worth $335 million to try and ease trade between both countries. And with AfCFTA in effect, truckers are expected to do less paperwork at customs while crossing border posts, thereby reducing the overall costs incurred and time lost. The Ugandan government has also deployed the army in the eastern DRC to curb insecurity. And these investments have begun paying off.
We've been able to take our military fatigue. Recently, Fine Spinners was able to take our products as far as Guinea, and these are negotiated markets with His Excellency. Our president negotiates these markets, and we're able to take our scholastic materials and supply them in Burundi, among other things. Even we go. Do not forget that Morocco is within that free trade area. We had our electronics, our mobile phones. We had to ship them as far as there.
The continent is, however, yet to gain meaningful trade under AfCFTA, with challenges in both tariff and non-tariff barriers. To create new opportunities, countries like Uganda, through their national carrier, are opening up new direct routes to cities like Lagos to reach Nigeria's multi-billion-dollar economy. This is expected to reduce freight costs by about $16 on every kilogram between both countries, but Minister Anita thinks more has to be done.
I just want to caution and encourage Ugandans that for you to be able to compete in a market like Nigeria, you then, and even out the other markets, it always boils down to quality. If your product is not the right quality, just know that you'll not be able to compete in those markets. So there's one thing which is quality, the other which is branding.
Many African business ventures are keen on getting strong footprints in new countries on the continent. By increasing value on their products, they may not only rake in an extra dollar, but could also match more established competition from other continents. Darren Alan Cheyune, Africa Matters, Kampala, Central Uganda.
To West Africa now, where Ghanaian businesses are beginning to penetrate new markets in the continent, thanks to the Free Trade Area deal. The initiative, launched in 2018 by the African Union, was meant to deepen the economic integration of Africa. And some businesses in Accra are already taking advantage of the initiative to do business with others across their borders, as Isaac Kaleji reports.
Felix Kamasa and his team are busy packaging these locally grown sweet potatoes at this warehouse in Ghana's Volta region. They were already exporting to Nigeria and the Ivory Coast, but now they are expanding to East Africa markets after the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was launched in 2021.
We see it as a big opportunity in the sector because after some of the country we are targeting, you can go by road, not using by air, which it will take a cost of air freight out of the system. So it's good, this opportunity for us to trade among ourselves.
Ghana is home to the Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. The government opened a coordinating agency to support local businesses, positioning themselves better to benefit from AfCFTA. It hopes to boost the country's trade with other African nations that's grown to more than $4 billion since 2019. Hundreds of Ghanaian businesses have now secured certificates of origin, a document that enables them to export to other African markets.
So we came out even with a national policy and action plan, kind of like a medium-term strategy document that we have developed to steer the affairs of the AfCFTA implementation. And along some thematic areas, we have trade policy. We want to see how we can harmonize our laws to make sure it fits into the AfCFTA. We're talking about capacity building for the SMEs. We need to boost their production capacity.
The prospect of the continent-wide free trade area to propel the growth of African economies is not in doubt. But a lot of work still remains to be done to fully realize the proposal. Now, movement of goods and people across borders to facilitate trade is still a major challenge.
For some analysts, local businesses should be put at the center of the solutions to the current challenges.
We love words. Words are great at summits, conferences, you'll hear many words, but it's about the action. And hopefully with the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, we're going to see the real drivers that are going to support manufacturers in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Senegal, to actually trade with each other, where we can have specialist services, where we can trade with each other and encourage development in each of those countries. It's about collaboration, and it's about talking to each other.
The dream of the Continental Free Trade Area is still a work in progress, but success stories like those of Kamasa are giving hope to many small businesses and showing that it's possible to expand and trade in more African markets to maximize even more in the coming years. Isaac Kaleji, Africa Matters, Accra.
Now to Nigeria, where the government is working out how to reduce tariffs, simplify customs processes, and boost intra-African trade. But some experts say billions of dollars in infrastructure investment is needed to make it work. Hilary Naruka reports from Africa's largest city, Lagos.
Jumoke Dada runs a furniture-making company in Lagos. The sofas, tables, and other units produced in this factory are available in all parts of Nigeria, and her company, Taylor, has an office in Kenya. She is banking on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the continent's deal to create the world's largest free trade zone, to make her a household name.
Taylor's goal as a brand is to be in every major African city. Part of our plan is in this last quarter of the year, we are going to Ivory Coast. So for every major African city, I want Taylor to be there. That's the goal. We have to be a Pan-African brand.
Nigeria is already part of ECOWAS, a political and economic bloc that allows for trade between 15 countries in West Africa. Economists hope that such regional trade agreements will serve as building blocks of the AfCFTA, which aims to make Africa a single market by reducing tariffs among member states by 90%, simplifying customs processes, increasing intra-African trade, as well as boosting national and personal incomes. Despite being ratified by all but one of the continent's 55 countries, there is still one major challenge: the infrastructure to move goods from one place to another.
I think it's a multi-faceted issue or a problem because manufacturing in itself doesn't exist in a vacuum. Manufacturing exists as a factor of many other things: human capital, power. You have spoken about infrastructure, road network, rail. There's so many things. Even the area in itself needs to have proper seaports and proper drainage for the big vessels to be able to berth.
Analysts say Africa's largest economy, Nigeria, requires $15 billion in annual infrastructure investment over 15 years to revamp and build ports and roads. Those investments would enable companies like Dada's Tailor to manufacture and ship goods at better prices than those imported from Asia, Europe, and America.
Experts project that proper implementation of the free trade area will see cross-continent exports increase by more than 81% by 2035. That could make Africa a $29 trillion economy by 2050. But much of that success depends on the right investment in logistics systems now. Hilary Noruka, Africa Matters, Lagos.
Staying in Lagos, Africa's most populous city, has become infamous for traffic. Like many metropolitan cities, population explosion is an issue disproportionately impacting it, but new mass transit projects could ease the burden. Bushra Goktash explains.
After years of delay, this train service is a lifesaver. The Nigerian megacity of Lagos and its more than 20 million residents are all too familiar with traffic jams. But the new blue rail line is expected to bypass the city's chronic congestion.
It's very unpredictable. We can't plan our life. You can't tell somebody in Ireland that you are coming within 1 hour because you don't know how the road is going to be. But with train, it's pretty straightforward because you know when you are going to leave and when you are going to reach your destination. So, and again, on the health of Lagosians, because traffic have a toll on our life. So, and with this coming of rail, it's going to be a good thing for us in Lagos.
The metro system has been dogged by funding and administrative delays since it was initially planned in 1983. After 4 decades, the 13-kilometer line began ferrying passengers on September 4. The Chinese-funded project links the mainland part of the city, where most people live, with Lagos Island, where many businesses are based.
Before now, it takes like an hour plus from Marina to Mile 2 or from Mile 2 down to Marina because of the huge traffic. Sometimes the road will be blocked. You won't be able to just access the road. But now, we're happy about this.
According to Lagos State's transport agency, the completed line will span 27 kilometers and is expected to carry 500,000 passengers a day. It's also significantly cheaper than other transportation methods with the Recovery Card, which costs only $1 for a journey.
If I were to use buses, I will have to stop, apart from the hassle of having to enter the bus stops and all that, the traffic on the road, and this is really time saving.
Although the project might not be enough to solve traffic crisis for all 20 million Lagosians, it's still one of the biggest steps the city has taken toward that goal in decades. Bushra Göktaş, Africa Matters.
And finally, this week we explored Douala, Cameroon's economic capital. The cosmopolitan city is known as the gateway to Central Africa and is the chief port on the coast of the Gulf of Guinea. Let's take a closer look. That's our show this week. Kindly share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories on this episode or ideas on what you would like us to cover on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. You can watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search Africa Matters TRT World. Like, comment, and share. Goodbye.